Would you sacrifice your safety to live in a city that gives you economic freedom and economic opportunity, cheaper housing, low cost of living, but you got to keep your head on a swivel? That's what we're going to discuss today at the Strizzy Report. I'm going to keep it real, okay? Whether you're thinking about relocating, you're plotting some things down because you're trying to move within the next year or something, this is how seriously focused you have to be when you're choosing a location. Check this out.
You take a look, Chris Rock sitting right next to Kobe Bryant, shooting the breeze, funniest man in the world, telling jokes, and take a look at Kobe Bryant. I don't even hear you. I'm on a...
Whether you're retiring, relocating in general, or your job is moving you around the country, you got to be as laser focused with your relocation plan as Kobe Bryant in Game 7, 2010. Rest in peace, Kobe Bryant. You're going to have people like Chris Rock in your ear. You're going to see headlines like Chris Rock in your ear trying to move you off your game, trying to distort your plan. So if you stay laser focused and take heed to the data, man, you can't go wrong. But I'll tell you what, I moved to a crime-riddled city and I didn't see any of it. You're going to have people like me even saying that I didn't see any crime. It never happened to me. So let's go ahead and talk so you have the data so you can make the better decision for yourself. All right, there's two types of crime. There's violent crime and then there's property crime. So we're going to discuss violent crime and property crime for every 100K residents. So basically, for every 100K resident, they have this many residents that's affected with property crime. For every 100K resident, they have this many residents affected with violent crime. So that's how we're going to give you the data. Just so you know, this data is pulled and the earliest and accurate research is pulling into early 2024. So it finalized in 2023 and we're seeing some changes affected by the data up to 2024. So it's as recent as we could get with crime data. All right, let's go. The top city, and listen, I lived here, okay? I lived there. Memphis, Tennessee. Memphis, Tennessee has a violent crime of 2,572. So for every 100K resident, 2,572 of them get rolled, okay? Rickrolled, okay? Homicides, though, have been down 17%, robberies down 28%, property crime down 20% in 2024. The property crime that Memphis has, and this is high, and there's only one other city higher than Memphis in property crime. I'll give you a chance to see if you know that one. But the property crime is 8,463. For every 100K residents, 8,463 will get their property got. Now, this is car break-ins, property crime in your home, whatever the case, stolen phones, this is a property crimes. So that is very high, and that's what I saw firsthand in Memphis. People are leaving their cars unlocked now because stop smashing the windshield. I don't have any money to go pay for a new windshield. Just open the door and see that there's nothing in there. People are leaving notes on their car doors like just there's nothing in here. So we see a lot of property crime in Memphis, but it also is the top city for violent crime. Here we go with the second top city for violent crime is Detroit, Michigan. Detroit, Michigan, for every 100K resident, they're seeing 2,005 estimated get knocked off and rick-rolled, okay? Homicides are down, though, 18%. Shootings down, 16%. Carjackings down, 34% in 2023. As far as property crime, for every 100K residents, 4,811 of them will come and call the police because something happened with their car, property, home. That's what's going on in Detroit. It is the second highest in violent crime. The third highest in violent crime is Little Rock, Arkansas. However, its homicide count dropped 42% in 2024. That's a hell of a turnaround, hell of an improvement for Little Rock, Arkansas. So the property crime is not even on the map here for Little Rock, Arkansas. There's just data is so low that it's nil, okay? But the violent crime is what's hailing in Little Rock, Arkansas. Let's talk about other cities, though, that did make the list, but their numbers aren't so sky high like Memphis, Detroit, and Little Rock. For violent crime, you still have Baltimore and Oakland. Baltimore has 1,500 estimated for every 100K, and Oakland has 1,270 estimated for every 100K. It's not as high as those other three on the top list. However, it is important to mention. Let's see if Baltimore has improved. I think it has. Homicides down 21%, non-fatal shootings down 34%, and robberies down in 2023. In Oakland, California, property crime actually rose. Their violent crime is lower than those other places, but their property crime rose 24% in 2023, but violent crime dropped 19% in early 2024. What does this look like? Let's talk about property crime. Property crime is something that you just don't want to deal with. I know violent crime is outrageous. You don't want to deal with that. But the nuances of just keeping your head on a swivel all the time for property crime is just ridiculous to me. Let's talk about the highest. Do you know the highest city for property crime? Right now, it is Oakland, California. It's sitting at 10,200. That means for every 100K residents, 10% of them will go through calling the cops for something with their property, okay? Some property crime that happened to them. That is a lot. And as you see here, property crime rose in 2023. Is it still going to be on the rise? Okay. The lowest in property crime, in fact, let's not even go with the lowest because property crime is property crime, right? But let's talk about Memphis's property crime. Memphis's property crime is not too far behind Oakland's. It's at 8,463. 8,463. So Memphis actually takes the cake for the highest violent crime and the highest property crime combined. And with that, you have to make a decision. So that's why I want to show you a tip on what you could do. Let's say Memphis, I've been screaming at the top of my lungs that Tennessee is it. Tennessee is my favorite state. It's the best state. You got to prove me wrong that it isn't. And then I lived in Memphis. I never went through any of this property crime. I never had an incident with a violent crime. I did witness property crimes. However, I wasn't involved. So there is a tip on how to live in these places that are economically sound and you could actually increase. However, that is up to your level of comfort. If you are one of those types that you just don't want to deal with it, in fact, let's look at this.
And this was scary and wild. A shootout in the middle of the day, a 10-year-old child caught in the middle of it, and now we know how it started. Memphis police say they were trying to rob somebody for a pair of shoes. This happened a week ago, March 7th, on Yale Road between Raleigh and Bartlett. Memphis police say there was a group of 5 young people, one of them only 10, trying to steal shoes from somebody outside a convenience store. Well, the person ran inside the store, and that's when somebody in that car sitting across the lot, look at it. See the gun poke out? Opening fire on those kids.
Be honest, it's all about what the city is doing when you get a repeat offender, when you have someone with a jacket, when you have someone that has a history of crime. What's happening and why people are so freely able to do more crime and keep it going in these places is because they walk in the jail and then walk out. Sometimes no bond, sometimes $50 bonds. These are folks that already have a criminal history and they have a revolving door down at the precinct. And that, I think, is the biggest problem in some of these cities, especially the way it's ran, where a little favor is put on keeping criminals in the streets. Would you move to these cities without concern for safety? If it means leveling up with your money, leveling up with your freedom, a great job, what can you do if the options are all leading to the city with more violent crime? So here's tip number one. Tip number one is watch YouTube videos of people driving through these areas. Now, this is what I did before I moved in Memphis, Tennessee. There's people that just has YouTube videos where they just drive around a city, right? They put the cam on the dash and it's 4K and they just don't say anything. And all they're doing is driving through these cities. They'll drive in areas, they'll drive downtown, and sometimes they'll actually put where they are in the city. Watch those videos before you relocate. Watch these videos of people driving around. And here's a clue on what to look for in the video. If they drive in a neighborhood and all you see is people hanging out, they pass a store, a bundle of people outside the store, listen, that's probably an area that has a lot of crime activity. I'm not trying to correlate. I'm just looking at the trends and the data that points to the areas where there's no activity, no productivity. It has higher levels of crime. If this person is driving around the city at 8 in the morning, 10 in the morning, and there's just a bundle of people outside not doing anything, they're not exercising, they're just hanging out outside, it's probably a red flag. And that was a red flag for me. If you also have to move or want to move in these type of areas, what you also could do is look at the map and go about 20 to 30 minutes outside of the affected area. So what does that mean? When I lived in Memphis, I was not in these areas, okay, with the issues. I was outside of the area. My job was primarily, down towards the city. However, I lived, I've shopped, I played, whatever. I did my exercise, I walked outside of those areas. And that's about 20 to 30 minutes outside of an affected area. What always surprises me is how there's a thin line between crime and no crime. Like you could literally go from one block to the other. One block is safe, the other block is a shootout every day. How is that? Why is that? And, it came clear to me also in Memphis, the Mississippi borderline is right there. The crime effectively stood in Memphis and never really crossed over into Mississippi, Olive Branch, and all these different places. Why? Why is that? Because it's in certain pockets of areas that you see the crime, and primarily they don't move out of that area. Now, it's not an always and an exception. There will be times, and I'm not saying that you won't be affected outside, but it is a good rule of thumb to be 20 to 35 minutes outside of these areas. All right, and then the last tip I have is my 12-month relocation guide. Why do I want to give you that? I'm offering that for you for 100% free. All you have to do is go to strizzyreport.com/blueprint. I'll put the link there, description, and in the comments for you. Just be a part of this newsletter that I have. I send out 10 gems every week on Sunday for you if you're thinking about relocating for investment, retirement, whatever the case. Relocation is what it's about. If you sign up to that newsletter, I'll give you a 12-month relocation guide. Now, why is that important in terms of this and crime? Because it teaches you how to do the research. It teaches you about yourself, what you will not tolerate, what you will tolerate. And it gets to the nitty-gritty of picking a state, picking a city, picking a town that is beneficial for you and for your goals. So that's why I want to give you that, and I'm going to give that to you for totally free. Today, all you have to do is head over to strizzyreport.com.